I'm April. Standing in my mother's wildflower meadow, watching as the man I once thought was my husband, now revealed as a fraud, is being handcuffed by the FBI, I'm flooded with a mix of relief and disbelief. It's been a long and arduous journey to get here, and it all started with a seemingly innocent visit to a notary's office. I grew up in a small town outside Seattle, Washington, in a beautiful Victorian house that my great-great-grandmother built in 1910. Everyone in the area knew the Thompson place. After my father passed away from a stroke when I was 8, my mother, a kind-hearted elementary school teacher, raised me there. She was frugal, always looking for ways to save money, but she held on to that house and the 90 acres of land around it with all her might. When I went to college, she made me promise to come back to the land someday, and I wholeheartedly agreed. I attended the University of Washington for my undergraduate degree and then got a master's in environmental science at Washington State University. I built a career in environmental conservation, working on projects to protect local ecosystems. It wasn't a high-paying job, but it gave me a sense of purpose. I moved to Seattle for a job at a mid-size environmental firm and bought a small apartment. My life was simple, with a modest paycheck. What no one knew, not even most of my friends, was that when my grandfather died 10 years ago, the family land and a trust he had quietly funded over 35 years passed to me. The trust was worth over $3,500,000, and the 90-acre land on the Cascade mountainside was a valuable piece of property. I didn't flaunt my wealth. I kept driving my old Toyota and lived in my small apartment. The land was the most important thing to me, not the money. 3 years ago, I met a man named Ethan Reid at a coffee shop in Seattle. I was working on plans for a wetland restoration project, with papers spread across 2 tables. He was in a sharp business suit and asked if he could share the outlet near my chair because his laptop was about to die. He had a smooth, charming voice and a warm smile. He said he was a regional manager for a large construction company. He didn't ask about my job for a long time, and when I finally told him, he showed genuine interest, asking detailed questions about my work. We dated for 12 months. He was incredibly attentive, always making me feel special. He met my mother on Mother's Day weekend. On the drive back to Seattle, my mother called me. "Honey," she said hesitantly, "that man is too perfect. He seems to have an answer for everything before you even finish asking." I got angry. I told her she was being unfair. He had been so polite, bringing her flowers and helping with the dishes. I hung up on her and didn't call her back for 10 months. 14 months after we met, we got married in a small ceremony at the city hall. He said he wanted it small because he didn't have much family. I was in love, so I agreed. My mother came, wearing a purple dress. She barely smiled in the photos, but she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm here for you, always." I rolled my eyes, thinking she was just being overprotective. We started trying for a baby right away. I was 32, and he was 40. On the 5th month, I got pregnant. He was overjoyed, crying tears of happiness. The pregnancy was easy at first. He was so caring, giving me foot rubs and bringing me snacks for morning sickness. He even started researching pediatricians. I thought I had found the perfect husband. But around the 4th month, things started to change. He began taking calls in the garage with the door closed. When he came in, he'd say it was a client or a contractor, and his face would have this strange expression, like he was hiding something. He bought a new phone, saying his old one was malfunctioning, but I caught him using both. When I asked, he said it was for a side project, some construction deals with a friend. He told me not to worry and to focus on our baby. He also started bringing up money. He said we should refinance my apartment to invest in a construction project. He said my car wasn't safe for a baby and that he'd buy me a new one, but it should be in both our names. He also mentioned that it was risky to keep the land and the trust in just my name. What if something happened to me during childbirth? What would happen to him and the baby? He had a folder full of documents, which he placed in front of me at the kitchen table late at night when I was exhausted. He said, "Just take a look, honey. Trust me." Some instinct in me stopped me from signing. I didn't know why, but I just couldn't. When I refused, he'd get quiet for a couple of days and then come back with flowers and an apology. My mother's words would echo in my head, but I pushed them away. At 6 months of pregnancy, I found a hotel charge on our credit card, a stay at a Hilton in Tacoma on a Wednesday in April. He told me he was at a project meeting in Olympia that day. When I questioned him, he didn't even flinch. He said it was a mistake, that he had to drive a client to Tacoma and forgot to expense it. I was too tired to fight, so I let it go. By the 7th month, my ankles were swollen, and I was constantly tired. He brought up the refinance again, saying the nursery wouldn't be ready in time. He claimed he'd done the math, and refinancing the apartment, taking out some equity, would help us finish the nursery and have some extra money after the baby was born. He said he knew a notary who could meet us on a Saturday morning to sign the papers. I was so worn out that I just said, "Okay." On that fateful Saturday morning, we drove to a strip mall in a town I'd never been to, about 50 minutes from our place. The notary's office was called Grace Thompson Notary Services. Inside, it smelled like lemon cleaner and old coffee. The notary, an elderly woman in her 65s with gray hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses on a chain, greeted us warmly. She called Ethan by his first name and asked how we were. He said we were great, just getting the nursery ready. She had us sit down and asked for my driver's license. As she was flipping through the documents, her pen stopped halfway through signing on page 7. She froze, her hand hovering over the paper, looking at my license as if it were a foreign object. Then, she carefully put the pen down and asked if I could step into her back office for a moment, just me, not Ethan. He laughed and said, "Sure, take her. Don't keep my pregnant wife too long." I followed her down a narrow hallway lined with pictures of local forests. She closed the door behind us and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. She motioned for me to sit, but I was too nervous. I asked if there was something wrong with the paperwork. She looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Honey," she said, "I've been a notary for 35 years. What your husband is asking you to sign is not what he told you. You need to leave this office right now. Don't go home tonight, and please find a divorce attorney before morning." I laughed nervously, thinking she was confused. I told her we were just refinancing the apartment for the nursery. He had shown me the loan documents that morning. She didn't argue. Instead, she slid a page out of the stack and pointed to a paragraph I hadn't read. It was a 49-page document, and he had told me the rest was just standard boilerplate. The document wasn't a refinance at all. It was a home equity line of credit on my apartment, and stapled to the back was a quitclaim deed transferring a 49% interest in the Thompson family land to Ethan's name, along with a power of attorney giving him control over the trust during my childbirth and postpartum recovery. I was in shock. She explained that she had notarized documents for him before, twice. She now believed those properties were not his to sign. 3 weeks ago, her son-in-law, a paralegal at a law firm in Seattle, was doing a title search for a client and found a recorded interest filed by Ethan. He recognized the name from her notary log and called her. She had thought she was helping a man buy a small piece of land from his elderly uncle, but the signature had been forged, and the land had been resold within 8 weeks. She said she had been losing sleep over it. She had promised her husband that if she ever saw Ethan again, she'd find a way to warn the woman involved. She never expected that woman to be me. She told me I couldn't go home until I knew what I was facing. I sat down, putting my hand on my belly to feel the baby move. The baby moved, and I started to breathe again. I asked her what to do. She said she had a niece, a family law attorney in Seattle, and she was going to call her right away. She advised me to go back out and tell Ethan I wasn't feeling well, that I needed to go home and lie down and would come back next week. I went back out and put on a brave face. I said, "Ethan, sweetie, the baby is doing somersaults, and I'm going to be sick if we don't go home." He was immediately concerned, helping me up and apologizing to the notary. I drove home in the passenger seat with my eyes closed, memorizing every word the notary had said. That night, I lay in bed next to him, listening to him breathe. I felt a new clarity, a cold and determined feeling. I realized he had married me for my money and property. The next morning, I called my office and said I had a family emergency and would work remotely for 2 weeks. Then I drove 4 hours to my mother's house. She opened the door in her robe, holding a cup of coffee. When she saw my face, she put the cup down and opened her arms. I cried on her shoulder for hours. She didn't say a single "I told you so." She just held me and rocked me. When I could finally talk, I told her everything. She listened intently and then said, "Let's get to work." It turned out that my mother had grown up with the senior partner of one of the most prominent family law firms in Western Washington. They had been friends since childhood. My mother called her and said, "I need you to help my daughter. That husband of hers is a fraud." The lawyer agreed to see me on Wednesday. On Wednesday afternoon, I met with the attorney, a no-nonsense woman in her 45s named Lily Carter. Her office had a view of the Puget Sound. She had already pulled Ethan's public records. She slid a folder across the desk and said, "Your husband isn't who he says he is. His real name is Derek Johnson. He is 46, not 40. He has been married twice before, both marriages annulled within 20 months. Both wives had inherited property, and in both cases, he tried to acquire an interest in their properties through forged documents. One of the wives had sued him and won, but he had managed to move the money. The other wife in Oregon had dropped the case out of fear. Derek also had 2 outstanding warrants in 2 states for identity theft and fraud. He had been using the Ethan Reed identity for about 6 years, stealing the ID of a man who died in a boating accident in Alaska in 2017. Lily said we couldn't confront him right away. We needed to wait until after I gave birth. If we moved now, I'd be giving birth in the middle of a federal arrest, which wasn't good for the baby. She assigned a private investigator, a retired police officer named Sarah, to watch him. For the next 7 weeks, Sarah built a file on Derek. I went home and pretended everything was normal. I asked him about the refinance and said I was sorry for getting sick at the notary's office. I told him I was ready to sign the papers. He was so relieved, his whole demeanor changing. As my due date approached, he became even more attentive. He bought me a pregnancy pillow and decorated the nursery. I went into labor on a Friday morning in September. He was in the room, acting like the perfect husband. When our son was born, I named him after my grandfather. He didn't know that the middle name I gave him was the maiden name of Lily, a little secret between me, my mother, and the women who were helping me. After we came home, he brought up the refinance again at the 4th week. I said we should do it at the baby's christening at my mother's farm. I told him it would be a small gathering, just family and a few friends. He thought it was a wonderful idea. On the day of the christening, the sun was shining, and the meadow was filled with wildflowers. My mother had decorated the place with white lanterns. 48 people came, most of them my friends and family. What he didn't know was that the notary, Lily, 2 FBI agents, Sarah, and the 2 ex-wives were also there. The daughter of the man whose identity he had stolen flew in from Alaska. After the pastor blessed the baby, Derek took the microphone and gave a speech about family and how grateful he was to be a father. Then he said he had one more announcement, about how lucky he was to be part of the Thompson family and the land. I took the microphone from him and said, "Thank you, but I have something to say too." I told everyone about the notary, the deed, and the power of attorney. I revealed his real name, Derek Johnson. His face went pale, and all the charm and confidence disappeared. He started backing away, but the FBI agents stepped in. He tried to run but was caught by the deputy who had been waiting down the road. The federal case took 12 months. Derek pled guilty to identity theft, wire fraud, mortgage fraud, and conspiracy and was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. His cousin, who was involved in the scheme, got 4 years. The lake house in Oregon that he had bought with the ill-gotten gains was sold, and the proceeds were split between the 2 ex-wives, the daughter of the stolen identity, and me. But I decided not to take any money. My marriage was annulled, and my son now carries the Thompson name. My mother moved into the guest house on the property 6 months after the christening. We have breakfast together every morning, making up for the lost time. I think about the notary every day. She was a stranger who had the courage to lock that door and save my life. I sent her flowers every month for a year, and she came to my son's first birthday. She held him and said, "I'm so glad I caught it." I am too. I've learned 3 important lessons from this experience. First, trust your gut. It's not just hormones or paranoia. When someone is trying too hard to convince you of something, there's usually a reason. Second, integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. The notary could have just signed the papers, but she didn't. Third, the people who truly love you don't hold grudges. My mother could have been angry at me for ignoring her warnings, but she just opened her arms and helped me. I tell this story whenever I can, hoping it will reach someone who needs to hear it. Listen to your instincts, read every page of the paperwork, and if a stranger asks you to step into a back office alone, go. Because sometimes, a small act of courage can change your life.